The night she left, the rain didn't just fall. It kept time, a slow, steady tapping against the kitchen window perfectly synced to my heartbeat. April 10th, 2021. Charleston nights have a particular kind of damp, the kind that settles into your skin and never lets go. I was barefoot on the porch when Vanessa zipped up her monogrammed leather duffel. That sound, the zipper, still lives somewhere in the back of my skull. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. She turned, perfectly blow-dried hair brushing the collar of her trench coat, and said it like a line she sit practiced in the mirror. Graham can give me the life I deserve. 22 years, our years folded into a single sentence. She walked down the porch steps like someone stepping out of a life she no longer respected. Her heels clicked against the wet concrete, sharp and deliberate. A black Tesla Model S idled at the curb, headlights slicing through the rain like surgical beams. Graham didn't bother to step out. He didn't have to. In her eyes, he was already the future. The door closed with that expensive air-sealed thud. And just like that, she was gone. She left behind two things: the fading trace of her Chanel perfume in the hallway, and the prenup folder on the kitchen counter. She used to call it just paperwork, but that night, soaked to the bone, and holding it against my chest, it felt like something else entirely. Something solid. I whispered to the rain, or maybe to myself, this isn't set the end. 2 years later, that same man she left me for would be sitting across a mahogany boardroom table, begging me to save him. When I stepped back into the kitchen, the rain had tracked muddy footprints across the tile. She always hated that. I didn't wipe them up. Her chipped mug, the one she refused to throw away, sat cold and half empty on the counter. The prenup lay there too, still sealed in the cream envelope we'd signed before our wedding in 1999. She'd hated the idea back then. Why would you need something like this? We love each other, she'd said, and I told her what I told. Every client who walked onto one of my job sites, I build bridges for a living. I don't cross them blind. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the pages with wet hands. My eyes didn't really read at first. They just landed on the embossed notary seal, the date August 14th, 1999, and the clause I'd half forgotten but never erased: the house stays mine. Outside, the oak tree we planted that first spring swayed against the rain. She'd called it our forever tree. Funny how forever can rot quietly, long before the trunk gives way. At 11:17 p.m., the phone buzzed. One message. Please don't make this ugly. You shall be fine. That was it. 22 years, 2 kids, 1 house, a lifetime reduced to a single careless line. She didn't even bother with punctuation. I didn't reply. I just slid the prenup into the drawer by the stove, the one where I kept appliance manuals, tax filings, and things worth keeping. That drawer would become my war chest before I even realized a war had started. When I walked upstairs, her closet gaped open. Empty hangers swayed lightly from where she'd stripped her life out. The perfume she sprayed before she left lingered like a ghost. I stared at the empty space where her blue silk dress used to hang, the one she wore the night we toasted 20 years at Harborview. We'd clinked glasses under warm string lights, believing in things that now felt laughably fragile. Our son was away at college in North Carolina. I didn't call him. How do you explain something like this over the phone? Hey, bud. Your mom just left in a Tesla with a billionaire. Sleep tight. No. Not yet. I walked back downstairs, poured a whiskey, and stood in the doorway like a man looking at a house he no longer recognized. But here's the thing. I did own it. She'd signed away her claim. She thought the future was somewhere else. Around 1:03 a.m., I picked up the prenup again. I hadn't signed it to trap anyone. I signed it because everything in my life was built slowly, brick by brick. Engineering doesn't forgive shortcuts. Neither does time. Vanessa was impatient. She hated waiting for cement to dry, for plans to finalize, for anything that required stillness. Graham Lasker, the so-called billionaire, promised shortcuts. He promised fast. But revenge doesn't set sprint. It waits. That night wasn't rage. It was quieter. Like standing on a bridge in the dark and hearing a single bolt pop, the kind of sound that tells you something is shifting. Not tonight, but eventually. At 2:47 a.m., the old pendulum clock Eleanor gave us as a wedding gift chimed 3 slow times as I stood. I walked to the front door, locked it, and turned the deadbolt. The house creaked. It always creaked, but that night it felt like it was listening. I whispered to the empty living room, "Let's see what you sip are really made of, Colin." And here sips the line I didn't then but would live by. The same hand that trembled holding that folder would one day sign the deed to the empire she abandoned. 3 days later, I'd find the clause she forgot. 3 months later, I'd stand on courthouse steps with a single $100 bill, and 2 years later, I'd watch her and Graham crumble under their own weight. But that night there was only rain, only silence, only a man, a piece of paper, and a promise he hadn't yet said out loud. If you ever wonder what revenge really sounds like, it doesn't start with yelling. It starts with the slow tap of rain against glass, and a man refusing to be erased. Silence has a weight. Not the gentle kind, like after a song ends. The kind that presses against your chest and makes every breath sound louder than it should. When Vanessa left, the house didn't scream. It exhaled. And then it went quiet. 3 days after the Tesla disappeared into the rain, the creak of the floorboards became a clock I couldn't turn off. Charleston mornings in April usually smell like wet oak and sweet tea brewing somewhere down the block. That week they just smelled like stale coffee and her absence. I kept the curtains closed. The house was still hers in too many ways. Her robe on the back of the bathroom door, her perfume in the closet, the indentation of her pillow beside mine. Grief isn't loud. It drips. It drips in the sound of one mug hitting the dishwasher rack, in the hollow footsteps echoing down a hallway that used to be full, in the soft static of a television left on just to drown out your own heartbeat. I stopped answering calls. Work sent messages, site reviews, engineering schedules, bridge inspections. I ignored them all. Engineers are supposed to fix cracks before they turn to collapses. But what do you do when the crack is in you? On the sixth night, I sat at the kitchen table in the dark. I hadn't turned on a single light. The clock above the sink said 2:12 a.m. I held the edge of the oak table we'd built together in 2004. I sanded that table myself. She'd picked the finish. I don't know what broke first, the stillness or me. It started as a short breath, then a sound low in my chest. By the time it reached my throat, it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a collapse. My body folded forward, forehead against the cool wood, and the tears came without permission. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't brave. It was raw, shaking, silent at first, then anything but. I grabbed the leg of the table like a man drowning grabs a lifeline. No cameras, no witnesses, just a sound that didn't stop. Vanessa once whispered, I'm tired of being invisible. I built her walls. I built her kitchen. I built her house. But I never built light where she needed it. And now here I was, crying in the dark like a man who'd forgotten how to breathe. The next morning I stood at the threshold of my house. I called Olivia Carter. She and I met back in college before any of this. She'd gone into law. She didn't ask questions when she picked up. "You still ready?" she said. "I have to be," I answered. On April 12th, 2021, we served legal notice, prenup enforcement. She hadn't contested the clause back in '99 because she didn't think she'd ever need to. 2 hours later, a locksmith changed the locks. I stood on the porch while the old brass tumblers dropped into a new pattern. The click of the lock echoed through the hallway like a punctuation mark. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the receipts came next. Every relationship has its artifacts, little pieces of paper that tell stories people forget to say out loud. Grocery runs, dry cleaning tickets, a gas bill she always left unopened. I started collecting them. At first it was distraction. I lined them on the kitchen counter in a straight row, April 3rd, April 7th, April 10th. I underlined the date on the one from the cafe on King Street, the one where she used to meet friends for wine at lunch. $28.46. 2 glasses of Sauvignon Blanc and a salad she never finished. I slipped that receipt into a separate drawer. That night, when the house creaked again, it didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like foundations settling, shifting beneath something new. I walked through each room like a surveyor, not just seeing, measuring. Her absence was an architectural problem now. The master bedroom smelled faintly of her night serum. The closet had a single cashmere scarf left behind. The upstairs office still held an envelope of mortgage records, her handwriting looping across the corner like she owned it. But she didn't. The prenup had seen to that. On the oak dresser, I found a photo of us from 2005, Hilton Head. We were laughing then, wet sand between our toes. I set the photo face down, not out of rage, just finality. On the eighth night, I took the prenup back out of the drawer. This time I read it line by line. Section 4. Real property. In the event of separation or dissolution of marriage, the property located at 218 Willow Street, Charleston, South Carolina, shall remain the sole property of the signatory, Colin Hart. Her signature, Vanessa L. Hart, curled next to mine like a promise she'd forgotten she made. I traced the embossed seal with my thumb. Some people build houses, I whispered. I built a fortress. Eleanor, my sister, showed up the next morning with a paper bag of cornbread and a look that only older sisters have, the one that can see through every brave face. She didn't knock. She never does. "I sep not here to fix it," she said. "I sep just here to be loud in the silence." She opened the curtains, light hit the floorboards. Dust floated like it had been waiting its turn. We sat at the table. I didn't set tell her about the breakdown. She didn't set ask. She just poured coffee, handed me a slice of cornbread, and said, "You star still standing. That sep's something." And it was. That afternoon I did something quiet but irreversible. I opened a manila folder and labeled it, in black ink, Lasker Prep. I didn't know every step yet. I didn't know what July 3rd would look like, or how many lies I'd eventually unwind, but I knew something fundamental. I wasn't going to fight this war with yelling. I was going to fight it with paper. Paper, patience, and precision. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was listening. And so was I. Early May arrived with that thick, humid Charleston air that feels like it's wrapping itself around your ribs. It had been 3 weeks since the lock change. The house still carried her ghost in the corners, but something had shifted. Grief had burned down to embers. I wasn't collapsing anymore. I was listening, watching, collecting. On a gray Monday morning, I called Olivia Carter. We met at a diner on King Street, the kind of place with cracked leather booths and coffee that tastes like it's been burning since sunrise. She slid into the booth across from me in her black blazer, hair tied back, pen already tapping against her legal pad. "You brought it?" she asked. I reached into my messenger bag and placed the prenup folder on the table like a chess piece. She opened it, scanned the clauses, and let out a quiet whistle. She signed her exit. Olivia said softly, "You Sev got the house locked down, but I think we can do more." That was the first time I saw it. The shift from loss to leverage. Sam Patel joined us 10 minutes later. We'd known each other since I did structural work on his firm's office years ago. A forensic accountant, with the patience of a metronome. His tie was crooked, his eyes sharp. "So," he said, sliding a yellow legal pad across the table. "Graham Lasker, real estate mogul, likes rooftop parties, bad debt structures, and unpaid contractors." I frowned. "Unpaid contractors?" Sam smiled. "Oh yeah, Guy Sip's empire is scaffolding overwrought. Looks shiny on the outside, but the foundation Sip's already cracking." He flipped open the pad. UCC liens, balloon notes, past due vendor payments. Words most people skip in contracts like background noise. But not me. I live in blueprints and load limits. Olivia leaned in. "You can hit a man like Graham head on, but if you find the right bolt, the whole bridge collapses." The next 3 weeks were a study in quiet obsession. Every morning I woke up at dawn, brewed black coffee, and cleared the oak table. I turned it into my war room. One stack for receipts, one stack for SOAS filings, one stack for UCC lien searches. I moved like I was back on site, except the structure I was inspecting wasn't concrete. It was Graham's empire. May 7th, 2021. Sam emailed me a PDF UCC financing statement no 2020 24,441 $3.8 million balloon note. Maturity June 30th. Collateral Lasker Urban Partners LLC. Overleveraged, he said on the phone. And when guys like Graham say the liquid does it, they usually mean they said are drowning. I printed it, underlined the maturity date in red, and pinned it to the corkboard above the table. May 12th. Olivia forwarded a scanned vendor affidavit. $236,000 unpaid to Charleston Masonry. Filed March 30th. Signed notarized. Real cracks, not rumors. May 19th. The Secretary of State website coughed up a corporate filing, statement of authority amended, listing Graham as sole managing member. No secondary protections. No shield. And there, buried in the fine print, like a whisper in a storm, was my opening membership interest could be sold under a trustee auction if the company defaulted. Vanessa had left me for a man standing on stilts in a hurricane. On May 23rd, I opened a clean manila folder and labeled it in block letters, Lasker Structure. I kept the Lasker prep file beside it. Inside went the lean printouts. So as filings, affidavits. I numbered every page. I'd spent my life in engineering, and engineers know you don't guess. You measure. Some nights when the house got too quiet, I'd sit at the table with the folder open, just staring at the red maturity date. The same rain that once soaked me on that porch now tapped softly on the window like a reminder. Vanessa's Instagram lit up that month with penthouse rooftop photos. Champagne flutes. Silk dresses. Graham in his tailored suits, arm draped around her like a trophy. She was living the surface. I was mapping the underneath. On the evening of May 27th, Sam and Olivia came to the house. I made black coffee. They spread the documents across the kitchen table like surgeons prepping for an operation. This is surgical, Sam said, adjusting his glasses. If he defaults, the trustee auction will be quiet. It always is. No flashy marketing. No big crowd. People miss these things. Olivia nodded. And if someone knows what to look for, I finished her sentence. They can buy the whole damn bridge for the price of a bolt. I remember stepping out onto the porch after they left. The humidity hung thick over Willow Street. Crickets hummed. Somewhere down the block, someone's porch fan spun lazily. 2 houses over, lights flicked on in the kitchen window, families moving through their ordinary lives. My ordinary life was gone, but something better, sharper, was forming in its place. I thought about Vanessa Seff's words that night she left. Graham can give me the life I deserve. She didn't know it yet, but the life she was stepping into was built on unpaid cement and maxed out lines of credit. And I had the blueprints now. By May 31st, the corkboard above my table looked like a tactical map. Red lines, pins, dates, lay-ins, maturity deadlines, trustee auction codes. I printed a copy of the prenup and pinned it to the center, not out of sentiment but strategy. Everything came back to that signature, that house, that foundation. I didn't have to chase Vanessa. I didn't have to outshine Graham. All I had to do was wait for gravity to do what it always does. I walked to the closet, pulled on my jacket, and looked at myself in the mirror. Not the version of me that was abandoned in the rain, but the one quietly tightening the bolts. Revenge isn't set rage, I whispered. It sets math. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't hear the house creak. It was steady now, like it knew something was coming. June came in heavy. Charleston heat doesn't just warm the air, it swallows it. By the first week, humidity clung to every surface, and the world outside my house moved slower, like it was stuck in syrup. But inside my kitchen, everything was precise. Measured, exact. The corkboard over my oak table was no longer a mess of paper. It was a machine. Every lean, every balloon note, every filing connected like trusses in a bridge. I wasn't stumbling through grief anymore. I was blueprinting revenge. On June 5th, Vanessa posted a photo. Rooftop bar, champagne glass in hand. Graham behind her, arm around her waist, the Charleston skyline fading gold in the background. She sipped and captioned it, "Finally the life I deserve." I remember tilting my phone slightly, seeing the reflection of the window behind me, my own face stone still. She was up in the air. I was underneath the foundation. That same afternoon, Sam forwarded me the default notice from Atlantic Harbor Bank. 3 pages. Signed June 4th, 2021. Graham had missed his second balloon payment. The language was cold, legal, devastating. Trustee auction to be scheduled pursuant to Section 369610 of the South Carolina Commercial Code. The crack wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was written in black ink. I printed it, underlined the auction clause, and pinned it dead center on the board. On June 8th, I drove to the Charleston County Clerk's office. If you've ever been inside, you know the air smells like a mix of dust and legal formaldehyde. I waited in line behind two property flippers arguing about lot lines. When it was my turn, I handed the clerk the file number Sam had dug up. She tapped her keyboard with the indifference of someone who's seen too many bankruptcies. Lasker Urban Partners, she said, glancing at the screen. Auction scheduled. July 3rd. Confirmed, I asked. She nodded. Trustee sale. Courthouse steps. 10 a.m. The way she said it, like it was nothing, made my fingers tighten around the edge of the counter. 10 a.m., July 3rd. A crack had a clock now. That night, I opened the safe in the corner of my study. It still smelled faintly of oil from the hinges I'd greased a decade earlier. Inside were a few things. A stack of cash I'd withdrawn years ago after my father died, a small metal lockbox with my passport, and an envelope labeled personal. I took out a single $100 bill, crisp, untouched. My father gave it to me when I landed my first engineering contract at 24. Never spend your first earned bill, he said. Use it when it matters. I held it between my fingers for a long time. Back then it felt like a souvenir. That night it felt like a blade. I folded the bill carefully, slid it into a plain white envelope and tucked it into the top drawer of my desk. June 12th. I met Olivia in her office. She was wearing that sharp navy suit that made judges nervous. She closed the door behind me and slid a thin folder across the table. Lien status on Lasker Urban, she said. It SEP's worse than we thought. Contractors are circling. She tapped her pen against the folder. If no one bids, the trustee will sell the membership interest to the highest legal offer. Minimum? $100. It sits boilerplate. I let that sink in. Vanessa left me for a man who built his empire on debt and Instagram filters, and in less than a month I could own it for the price of a dinner entree. I looked at Olivia. She didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. The same kind of glint steel gets when light hits the blade. Mid-June nights in Charleston are sticky and loud with crickets, but the night I walked the neighborhood was quiet. I paced beneath the oak tree in my yard, the same one Vanessa called our forever tree years ago. I brushed my hand against the bark, rough and scarred. Forever Sit's got a new landlord, I whispered. In the distance the church bells struck midnight. On June 17th, Vanessa called me for the first time in weeks. I didn't pick up on the first ring, or the second, but on the third I did. Her voice was soft, sugary, the way it gets when she wants something. Colin, hey. Vanessa. She laughed lightly, too forced. I just wanted to make sure you stood okay. I know things got weird. I leaned against the doorframe. Weird? I repeated. You don't have to be bitter, you know. Graham sips making everything better. He sips different, real. I stared at the oak floor beneath my feet. Is that what they sipped are calling default notices now? Silence. Just her breathing on the line, a little too sharp. What do you mean? Nothing you'll understand yet, I said, and I hung up. I slid my phone face down on the counter. I didn't need to say more. The walls around her were already cracking. She just hadn't heard the groan of the beams yet. By June 22nd, my prep folder was organized down to the last page. Sam had the trustee sale documents ready. Olivia confirmed there were no competing filings. Graham had no shield left. I started waking up earlier, walking the house like it was a blueprint, counting steps, measuring time. It wasn't about the house itself anymore. It was about what it represented. what she thought she was walking toward. On June 25th, I ironed my only gray suit. It had hung untouched in the back of my closet since our son's graduation. I polished the shoes, not because trustee auctions require suits, but because there's a kind of dignity in showing up to the end of something looking like you planned it. June 30th, the bank filing hit the public docket. Graham Lasker, material default, balloon, note 2020 4441. 3 words that taste like cold justice. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, the $100 envelope on the dresser beside me. I straightened the cuffs of the gray suit, watched my reflection harden into something it hadn't been in years. Not broken, not desperate. Prepared. The rooftop photos had stopped by then. Vanessa hadn't posted in a week. Graham was too busy putting out fires he didn't know were already embers. July 3rd was coming, and I had the only currency that mattered: patience, proof, and one crisp $100 bill. July 3rd arrived like a storm you could feel under your skin before it broke. Charleston mornings are quiet in the summer, too hot, too humid for chatter, but the courthouse steps had their own rhythm. The air smelled faintly of wet brick and magnolia sap. I'd polished my shoes the night before, pressed the gray suit, folded the $100 bill into its white envelope, and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. No briefcase, no entourage, just me, my attorney Olivia Carter, and Sam Patel with his calm accountant's eyes. "This is it," Olivia said, adjusting her blazer. "This is just the beginning," I answered. The courthouse clock struck 10. Trustee auctions aren't glamorous. There's no velvet rope, no flashing cameras, just a few folding chairs, a handful of men in cheap suits, and a trustee with a voice like wet gravel. The humidity made the paper curl in the clerk's hands. He cleared his throat. "Trustee sale of membership interest in Lasker Urban Partners, LLC. Pursuant to South Carolina Commercial Code Section 369610. Opening bid $100. I could hear the faint sound of cicadas screaming in the trees. No one moved. Not one of the developers who used to orbit Graham's champagne parties. Not a banker. Not a contractor. Not Vanessa. The trustee repeated himself. Opening bid $100. I raised my hand. Slowly, deliberately. "Bid received," the trustee said. It took him less than 6 seconds to bring the gavel down. "Sold." The sound of that gavel didn't echo like in movies. It landed soft, absorbed by thick July air. But in my chest it was seismic. In that instant, I legally owned the operating company behind every penthouse party, every rooftop photo, every lie she'd traded our life for. Sam leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "Congratulations, you just bought an empire for less than a dinner check." I exhaled through my nose, slow. "No," I said quietly. "I just bought the wreckage. The empire comes later." Olivia signed the transfer forms in practice strokes. Her handwriting never shook. She handed me the stamped copy. Assignment of membership interest, dated July 6th, 2021. I slid the document into the same folder where the prenup lived, 2 signatures 22 years apart, now sitting side by side. One ended a marriage, the other began my reckoning. I walked down the courthouse steps, like a man carrying something invisible but heavy. The sun hit the gray suit hard. Sweat collected behind my collar, but my hand was steady. I paused at the bottom, looking across the street. Vanessa's favorite cafe was there, the Marché on Broad. She used to drag me there on Saturdays, order overpriced rosé, and talk about someday. That morning she was sitting by the window. She was laughing at something Graham said. Champagne glass tilted in her hand, manicured nails tapping against the stem. She didn't know the ground had shifted beneath her. I didn't wave. I didn't walk over. I just looked at her the way a surveyor looks at a building they already know is condemned. We got in Olivia's car, a black Mercedes that smelled faintly of leather and strong coffee. Sam sat in the back, already tapping numbers into his phone. Olivia drove in silence for a few blocks before speaking. "You realize what you just did?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I bought a problem." "No," she corrected, eyes still on the road. "You bought leverage." We stopped at her office. She pushed a cold bottle of water into my hand before spreading the documents out on the glass table. "Here's the thing," she said. "On paper, you're now the controlling member of Lasker Urban Partners. That means all inbound legal and operational correspondence is yours. Emails, domain ownership, vendor negotiations, and most importantly, she tapped the signature line, lender communications. Sam leaned forward, and those lenders, they sep are going to be knocking. I nodded slowly. Good. I wasn't chasing Vanessa. I wasn't chasing Graham. I was building a wall around everything they thought was untouchable. That afternoon I went home, poured myself a black coffee, and sat at the oak table. I laid the $100 bill flat in front of me. It was slightly warm from my jacket pocket, edges crisp. I placed the stamped assignment of membership interest on top of it. My father Sips's voice came back to me. Use it when it matters. This mattered. I opened the safe, placed the bill and the document inside, then locked it with a clean click. The sound was small, but to me it was the sound of a gate closing behind them. At 6:47 p.m. Vanessa called. I knew she would eventually. I didn't answer at first. I let it ring until it almost timed out, then picked up. "Colin," she said, voice sharp with that edge she used to mask nerves. "What did you do?" I leaned back in the kitchen chair. "I bought something." "What?" "Something you stare standing on and don't even realize it." Her breath hitched. "Graham says it's just a cash flow thing." Of course he did. "Vanessa," I said evenly, "you built your castle on someone else's debt. I just bought the dirt under it." I hung up before she could respond. Later that night, I stood on the porch. The cicadas were louder than usual. The sky was deep and hot and heavy. Across the street, someone's dog barked once, then went quiet. The oak tree cast its long shadow across the front lawn. I thought about that moment on the courthouse steps, the stillness before the gavel fell. That sound would live with me for the rest of my life. People imagine revenge as loud, explosions, headlines, screaming. But sometimes revenge is just the sound of a small wooden gavel and one raised hand. Before bed, I took out the prenup and the assignment again, laid them side by side on the desk. 2 pages of paper. One said she left me. The other said I owned everything she left me for. And together they didn't scream. They whispered, "Power doesn't need noise. It just needs time." August in Charleston isn't kind. The air turns heavy, pressing on the lungs, and even the crickets seem to sing slower. But inside my house, the air was sharp, focused. 3 weeks had passed since the gavel fell. 3 weeks since $100 bill became the fault line beneath Vanessa Sepsto's better life. And every day since, the quiet fire I'd lit under their empire spread just a little more. The first ember came in the form of an email, August 1st, 8:14 a.m. Subject, new ownership contact. From Lender Services, lender@larberbank.com. To Obudo UNER@LASKERURBAN.com. Mr. Hart. This is to confirm transfer of all primary administrative access for Lasker Urban Partners, LLC. Please note that lender communications, notices, and defaults will be directed to you moving forward. I stared at the line. To you moving forward. Vanessa and Graham were drinking rooftop mimosas, while every creditor in the state now had my name on speed dial. And that was the point. The second ember came later that same day. The company's domain registrar transferred to me after the trustee finalized the assignment. I sat at the oak table with the paperwork and typed in the admin credentials. Blogan successful. The company inbox lit up like a Christmas tree. 238 unread messages. Vendor demands. Overdue invoices. 2 lawsuits in early filing. 3 lender notices. And 1 very polite email from a high-rise window installer. Dear Mr. Lasker, our team is still awaiting payment on the outstanding $86,420 balance from Phase 2 construction. We hope this is a simple oversight. I read it twice, then hit reply. This is not Mr. Lasker, this is Mr. Hart. I said I'll be reviewing all accounts. Expect follow-up in 14 business days. I didn't need to threaten. I just needed them to know the wind had shifted direction. That night, around 11:30, my phone lit up. Vanessa. I answered on the third ring. Colin. Her voice wasn't set sweet this time. It was tight, sharp around the edges. Why are you getting company emails? I leaned back against the kitchen counter, lights off, letting the glow from the fridge outline the room. Because I own the company. She gave a short, incredulous laugh. Graham says that SEB's impossible. Tell him to check the trustee filings. The silence on the other end stretched, long and brittle. This is a cash flow thing, she said, finally, voice cracking. It said'll all blow over. You stare standing in a house that SEP's already on fire, Vanessa, I said. You just can SEP smell the smoke yet. I hung up. In South Carolina, one-party consent laws mean that call was legal to record. I hit save and dragged the file into a folder marked call logs. By August 4th, Olivia had filed the paperwork confirming the updated member structure with the Secretary of State. Sam's team was combing through vendor claims with the quiet precision of surgeons. Every day brought more messages. Graham's creditors weren't loyal. They just wanted their money, and they'd talk to anyone holding the pen. I was holding the pen. August 9th. The lender call. Olivia and I sat in her office, air conditioning humming, her legal pad covered in notes. A man from Atlantic Harbor Bank spoke through the speakerphone, voice careful, practiced. Mr. Hart, given the company SIPS's current liquidity, we sit there open to restructuring discussions. We didn't expect, well, a new owner. I'm not here to clean up Graham SIP's mess for free, I said, evenly. But I know how to build things that don't fit collapse. A pause. Then understood. The conversation lasted 23 minutes. Every second was a shift in gravity. Meanwhile, Vanessa's post changed tone. No more champagne flutes or rooftop sunsets, just filtered shots of quiet nights at home. The penthouse, once a stage, was shrinking. On August 13th, she texted me at 12:11 a.m. Graham says everything up's fine. We still fix it, you still see. I didn't respond. The only people who say everything's fine are the ones standing on a bridge already shaking. The quiet fire burned faster than they could track. By mid-August, contractors were filing notices of unpaid balances. One vendor's attorney sent me a demand for mediation. Graham's name was still on everything, but I held the power to sign. On August 18th, Graham finally called. Colin, he said, voice syrup thick but brittle underneath. There SIP's been a misunderstanding? Is that what we calling auctions now? You sat, playing a dangerous game. No, I said calmly. You said the one who built a house out of unpaid invoices. I just bought the dirt. He let out a sharp breath. I already did. I saved that call too. That weekend, I walked through the house at dawn. The windows were cracked open, and the humid air carried the faint scent of gardenias from Eleanor's yard. The oak tree out front cast long shadows across the floorboards. I placed my hand against the cool wall. This house had been my wound for months, but now it was my fortress, my operations center. Every message Graham received, I saw. Every invoice he ignored, I controlled. Power isn't always about shouting. Sometimes it's about quietly moving the foundation a few inches at a time until the whole structure tilts. On August 22nd, Olivia slid a thick stack of documents across my kitchen table. Bank communications, vendor notices, internal emails. This, she said, tapping the pile, is what he set's been hiding behind. Sam added, you don't need to tear it all down. You just have to let gravity do what it always does. I nodded slowly. Let it collapse on its own weight. Vanessa and Graham thought the silence meant they'd won. But silence isn't Dust. Surrender. It's Dust's strategy. August 29th, 11:59 p.m. Another email hit the owner inbox. Notice of acceleration. Their world was officially on fire. And I didn't have to light a single match. June 29th, 2022. A year had passed since that gavel fell, and the heat in Charleston felt even heavier than the year before. The air was syrup thick, pressing against the glass walls of Lasker Tower like it wanted to melt them. I stood in the lobby that morning wearing the same gray suit I'd worn at the auction. It wasn't about luck, it was about symmetry. The glass elevator hummed as it climbed. My reflection followed me up the mirrored panels. Not the man barefoot on a rainy porch, but the man who'd bought an empire for $100 and spent a year letting it rot exactly as it deserved. The extraordinary members' session was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. I called the meeting myself as managing member. That phrase still made me smile in quiet ways. Managing member. The room was on the top floor, floor 27. The conference space was glass on three sides, with a view of the river cutting through the city like a slow blade. The long polished table was already set, legal folders at each chair, pitchers of water sweating in the heat. Vanessa sat near the far end, pearls around her throat. Lipstick perfect. She was trying to look composed, but her hands were restless on the table's edge, fingers tapping against the polished wood. She wore a pale pink blazer, the kind she used to wear when she wanted to impress Graham. Graham himself sat at the head of the table. His tan was fading, but the arrogance was still there. Or maybe it was just habit. His tailored suit looked more expensive than sense, but the man wearing it looked smaller than the legend she'd chased. Olivia stood beside me, black blazer sharp as ever. Sam took a seat 2 chairs down, already setting up his laptop. A court reporter adjusted her microphone at the end of the table. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a noose tightening. Let's call this session to order, I said. The words felt heavy in the air. The court reporter's fingers clacked against her stenograph. Graham gave a short, forced laugh. This isn't necessary. We can handle this privately. I took my seat, unfolded the assignment of membership interest, and laid it flat on the table between us. That's what this is, Graham. Private, board members only. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the paper, then back to me. What are you doing? She asked, voice brittle. I met her gaze evenly. Exercising my rights. Olivia slid a thick folder toward the center of the table. As of today, Mr. Hart is the controlling member of Lasker Urban Partners, LLC. Per the Articles of Organization and Assignment dated July 6, 2021, all management rights flow through him. Graham Sipp's smile faltered. This is absurd. No, Olivia said calmly. This is documented. Sam projected the financial timeline on the screen at the far wall. Line by line, the story unfolded. Missed payments, default notices, vendor lawsuits, accelerated liens, bank restructuring requests. All of it. 1 year of their gilded castle quietly hollowing itself out. I didn't look at Vanessa. I could hear the soft sound of her nail tapping faster against the wood. I remembered that sound. She used to do it when she lied about wine with friends. Graham leaned forward. So what? You think you can waltz in here and take over everything I built? Olivia didn't blink. He already did, a year ago. The door to the conference room opened briefly as a paralegal slid a stack of press packets to the lobby desk below, timed for 10:05 a.m. Not yet, but soon. Graham Sipp's voice got louder. This is extortion. No, I said softly. This is gravity. He turned to Vanessa for backup. She didn't speak. She just stared at the folder like it might burn her fingers if she touched it. At 9:37 a.m., I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small flash drive. I set it on the table with a quiet click. This, I said, is a recording from August 18th last year. Midnight, one-party consent. South Carolina law. Graham Sipp's face drained of its color. I pressed play. His voice filled the room low and sharp. You sigh, to playing a dangerous game. No, my voice answered on the recording. You start, the one who built a house out of unpaid invoices. I just bought the dirt. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It cracked. Vanessa's hand froze mid-tap. Olivia leaned back, satisfied. Sam didn't look up from his laptop. Graham's jaw twitched like a man feeling the edge of the cliff under his heels. This company is set yours anymore, I said, leaning forward slightly. It hasn't set been for a long time, but I set been patient. I wanted you to hear the sound of it collapsing before anyone else did. Graham slammed his palm against the table. You won set get away with this. Get away? I tilted my head. Graham, I own this. At 9:50 a.m., the elevator chimed. Two men in suits stepped out, bank representatives from Atlantic Harbor. They entered the room, nodding to Olivia. Mr. Hart, one of them said, extending a hand. We received your restructuring proposal. We stir ready to sign today. Graham Sipp's face went pale. Vanessa turned her head sharply toward me. You sipped her working with the bank. No, I said. I am the bank now, or at least the man they return calls to. 9:57 a.m. The court reporter's fingers danced faster. Graham leaned back in his chair, all the air gone out of him. Vanessa's hands were still now, frozen on the table. She'd chased a man she thought was a fortress. All she'd found was scaffolding. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and faced them both. I may not be a billionaire, I said quietly, but I buy better. At exactly 10:05 a.m. Olivia gave a single nod to the paralegal downstairs. A press release hit the wire. Lobby screens lit up with breaking local news. Abandoned husband becomes controlling owner of Lasker Urban Partners. Defaulted empire quietly purchased for $100. The elevator dinged again. This time reporters. Cameras flashed through the glass lobby below like small bursts of thunder. Graham's knuckles went white around the armrests. Vanessa stared straight ahead, mascara too perfect for the moment. Her silence said everything. I turned toward Olivia and the bank reps. Let's sign. The papers slid across the table. My signature went down in 3 smooth strokes. Click, click, click. This wasn't revenge served hot. It was delivered chilled, with precision. When I walked out of Lasker Tower at 10:17 a.m., the lobby was buzzing. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones pointed like bayonets. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The sunlight hit the marble steps like a spotlight. I stepped into it. Cameras clicked. Behind me, 27 floors up, Graham and Vanessa sat in silence, inside their collapsing world. The oak tree outside my house would always carry the memory of rain, but this day, this moment belonged to the quiet sound of everything they'd built on lies crumbling, and to me walking away with the deed. September came with heat that clung to the skin like guilt. Charleston's skyline shimmered in the late sun, and the tower Graham once bragged about was now just another building with a for sale notice quietly tucked into the lender's docket. The extraordinary members' session had been a clean execution. Surgical, precise. But what came after wasn't a bang. It was a slow, elegant collapse. The house of glass didn't explode. It shivered, and then it fell. The first crack came on September 4th. The Charleston Post and Courier ran the headline across the top of the Sunday business section. Abandoned husband becomes controlling owner of Lasker Urban Partners. $100 auction purchase exposes fragile empire. The photo beneath the headline showed me leaving the tower steps in that same gray suit, jaw set, sunlight cutting hard across my face. I didn't give them quotes. I didn't need to. The story told itself. Vanessa Sepp's friends didn't just call her that week. I know because one of them, Lydia, the same woman who once stood at our wedding, texted Eleanor. She wouldn't stop crying. No one sets inviting her anymore. Graham looks hollow. I didn't respond. It wasn't cruelty, it was distance. On September 9th, Graham's lawyers sent Olivia a cease and desist letter, bold font, empty threat. She smiled as she read it aloud in my kitchen. They sat bluffing. I sipped my coffee slowly. They sit been bluffing for a year. We drafted a one-line response. Ownership stands, trustee assignment final, member control legally exercised. No flourishes, no emotion, just law. The next day, Graham's lawyer withdrew the letter. By mid-September, the penthouse rooftop was empty. The same rooftop Vanessa used to flood with sunset photos. I walked by once at night not to gloat, but to see. The champagne lights were off. Curtains drawn. A silence heavier than any victory speech could have been. She had built an image around Graham, and I had pulled the floor out from under it with a single envelope. On September 16th, the contractor lawsuit filings went public. Lasker Urban Partners, outstanding $2.4 million in claims. Lenders proceed with asset partition. Olivia forwarded me the filing with a single line. And so the curtain falls. Graham's empire wasn't falling because I pushed. It was falling because I stopped holding it up. By September 20th, Vanessa moved out of the penthouse. She didn't call me, but the movers told Eleanor they saw her loading everything she owned into a rented U-Haul, pearls and all, with no champagne in sight. When I passed the building on the way home, the doorman gave me a look I'll never forget. Not judgment, not pity. Just quiet recognition of the shift in gravity. He didn't have to say a word. The tabloids came next. September 24th. Gilded couple crumbles Lasker empire on auction block. Photos of Graham looking exhausted, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Vanessa walking half a step behind him, sunglasses too big to hide the way her jaw clenched. For years she had wanted to be seen. Now she was just not in the way she'd imagined. I didn't revel in it. I mowed my lawn. I cooked breakfast with Eleanor when she visited. I started sleeping through the night again. The house didn't echo anymore, but the world around them did. On September 28th, I met Olivia at a quiet diner off King Street, the same one where a year earlier she had whispered she signed her exit. This time she laid a glossy folder on the table. Resale interest, she said. 3 offers, clean, they want the brand, the land, not the rot. Sam joined us with spreadsheets that showed figures that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. $1.2 million, not for a glass tower dream, but for what I rebuilt from its ashes. Do you want to sell? Olivia asked. I looked out the diner window. The street was busy, alive, unbothered by old wounds. Yes, I said finally. I never wanted their throne. I just wanted the ground back. The same day, Vanessa's sister posted a photo online, a single sentence beneath it. She's staying with me for a while. The woman who once stood under rooftop lights now shared a guest room in silence. And the man she left me for was fighting court filings with hands that had never held a hammer. The empire she traded me for had no foundation. All I did was let her hear it cracking. The oak tree outside my house was heavy with leaves again. The air smelled like the turn toward fall. For the first time in a long time, my home felt like it belonged entirely to me. The house of glass was gone, but the house of brick, mine, still stood. January 2023. Charleston's winter is quiet. Not bitter like up north, but slow, damp, still. The air held the weight of rain, even when the sky stayed clear. By then the newspapers had stopped calling it a scandal and started calling it a case. The Lasker Empire wasn't just a social story anymore, it was evidence. On January 3rd, Olivia called me into her office. The space smelled faintly of lemon oil and legal war. She had a neat stack of manila folders on her desk. She didn't sit. She handed me the top one. Grand jury filing, she said, bank SARS, vendor affidavits, trustee testimony. And Graham finally ran out of hands to plug the holes. The word SARS sat heavy in my stomach. Suspicious activity reports. Once those enter the pipeline, the machine doesn't stop. I flipped through the folder slowly. Wire transfers, overdraft notices, fake invoice schemes he thought no one would ever look at. He built a castle on debt and duct tape. All I did was turn the lights on. January 5th, the DA's office filed formal charges. State of South Carolina versus Graham Lasker. Fraudulent conveyance. Intentional misrepresentation. Tax evasion. Each word on the docket felt like a hammer hitting the wall of their old penthouse. One after another. Vanessa wasn't on the filings. Olivia had explained it weeks before. She wasn't an officer. She wasn't on the paper. She was a shadow in the background. But shadows can't protect anyone when the floodlights hit. On January 9th, the courthouse was packed. The press wasn't outside anymore. They were inside. Camera shutters clicked softly as the bailiff read out the charges. The courtroom smelled like polished oak and damp wool coats. I sat on the second bench behind the prosecution. Olivia to my right, Sam 2 seats down. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to testify that day. Just being there was enough. Graham walked in wearing a suit that didn't fit him right. It wasn't the tailored armor he used to wear, just cloth on a man who'd lost his script. Vanessa trailed behind him. No pearls, no pink blazer, just a beige coat too big for her, like she was shrinking inside it. The DA laid out the case like a blueprint. Clean, clean, unsentimental. False invoices routed through shell LLCs. Balloon notes extended on forged statements. Vendor checks kited to delay liens. Lender communications falsified with altered signatures. Everything he'd built was documented. Every shortcut, every fake smile, every unpaid bill. I had nothing to add. I'd already done my part a year ago when I'd bought the dirt under him. The rest was gravity. When the judge banged the gavel for recess, the sound wasn't loud, but it echoed through the hallway like a crack traveling down a pane of glass. Vanessa glanced back as they led Graham out of the room. For a moment, just 1 second, she looked like the woman I'd met at 25, before ambition turned into something sharp. Then she dropped her gaze. I walked past her without a word. January 16th. Olivia called again. The prenup sips is finally kicking in, she said, flipping through a folder in front of her webcam during our call. No contest. Their legal team folded. You said I'll get the house outright, plus the liquidated payout. I didn't smile, but I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not even relief, just quiet. Do they know? I asked. They know, she said. And Vanessa knows she signed that prenup 22 years ago. She can rewrite that. The total came to $260,000 between the prenup payout and my share of the liquidation. Money had never been the point. But the math was beautiful. January 21st. I walked past the courthouse steps again. The same ones where the trustee had handed me a company for $100. The air was cold this time. The trees bare. I stood at the top of the steps and looked out over the street. It was strange how a single place could hold both the beginning and the end of a storm. A reporter called out my name. Mr. Hart, do you have a statement? I shook my head. No statement. The only statement worth making had already been carved into the docket. January 25th, the DA secured the plea deal. Graham agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. He thought it would save him from everything. It wouldn't, but it would keep the trial quiet. Vanessa's name was never printed in the official record. But silence isn't the same as innocence. I knew, she knew, and the oak tree outside my house didn't care either way. The final check from the prenup hit my account on January 30th. I stared at the number for a long time, remembering the night she zipped that duffel bag and drove off in his Tesla like she was chasing some kind of golden future. The future caught up with her, and I walked away with my house, my name, and a balance sheet that didn't need lies to hold it together. The courtroom hadn't been loud. There were no shouting matches, no last-minute twists, just paper and law, and the soft sound of everything breaking exactly where it was weakest. Revenge isn't always a knife fight. Sometimes it's a ledger, and mine balanced clean. March 2023. The light in Charleston shifts that time of year. It softens. The mornings feel cool, not heavy, and the scent of wet oak carries through the neighborhood after every passing rain. The storms that roared through the previous year had given way to a season that just exhaled. My house, the one she almost took, the one I nearly gave up on, didn't echo anymore. Every morning started the same. I brewed black coffee in the kitchen and leaned against the counter, looking out the back window. The oak tree stood tall, branches twisting against the morning light like something that had weathered more storms than I ever could. It had seen her walk out. It had seen me break. And now it saw me stand. The difference was not that loud. It was quiet. On March 5th, my son came by. He's 20 now, taller than me. He stood on the porch with his duffel slung over his shoulder, wearing that half-smile he always used when he wasn't sure if he was walking into a storm or a calm. He hugged me, and for the first time in a long time I didn't flinch at the sound of someone else's footsteps in the house. We sat at the kitchen table, eating Eleanor's cobbler. No rooftop champagne, no contracts, just black coffee and cinnamon. You seem different, Dad, he said finally. I am, I answered. He leaned back in the chair, studying me like he was memorizing the shape of this version of me. I smiled. A real one this time. Better. March 8th. I opened the safe again. Not for a legal document, not for evidence. The $100 bill was still there. Crisp, clean, exactly how it looked on the day I folded it into that envelope. Beside it, the assignment of membership interest and the final bank statement from the resale closing. $1.2 million. It wasn't the money itself that mattered. It was what it represented, patience weaponized, grief architected into precision. I slid the bill into a frame I'd bought the day after the court ruling, the kind with a black matte border and museum glass. I hung it above my desk, a reminder of the day everything shifted. Not the day she left, the day I decided I wouldn't be broken. Vanessa hadn't called since January. Not after the plea deal, not after the house was officially signed over to me. But on March 13th at 7:48 p.m., her name lit up my phone. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring twice before pressing accept. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the sharpness it once carried. I made a mistake. I didn't say anything at first. The oak tree's branches scratched softly against the window. A dog barked down the street. Someone was cooking something with garlic. Life went on. "Colin," she whispered. I thought. I cut in gently. "I know what you thought." A long breath. "Are you happy?" "I am at peace," I said. Silence stretched between us. Not the kind that begged to be filled, the kind that simply was. "I hope you get what you need," I added. Then I ended the call. The phone stayed face down on the table, and I didn't feel a single tremor in my hands. On March 17th, Olivia and I met one last time at the diner on King Street. The same booth where the first plan had been scribbled on napkins and invoices almost 2 years earlier. She pushed the final closing papers across the table with a pen on top. "That seps it," she said. "Resale finalized. No loose ends." I signed with a single stroke. The pen didn't shake. My heart didn't race. "I guess this is where your quiet life starts," she added. I nodded. "Or maybe it sits just where the noise ends." She smirked. "You sipped your hard man to read, Colin." "Good," I said. "It seps easier to build in silence." That weekend I fixed the creaky board on the front porch, the one that had complained under Vanessa's heels every time she left the house in a rush. I sanded it down, replaced the nail, sealed it with care. It was such a small thing, but the sound of that single creak had followed me for months like a ghost. And just like that, it was gone. March 22nd. Eleanor came by with a pie, her voice filling the kitchen the way only sisters can. We talked about nothing important: gardening, a neighbor's bad paint job, some new bakery that opened downtown. I didn't have to mention the lawsuit, the press, or the revenge, because those things weren't who I was anymore. They were what I did. When she left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the night air settle. March 25th, I opened the old file box. Every receipt, every lien, every contract, every photo from those months of calculation. I stacked them neatly into one large folder, labeled it case, closed, and slid it to the back of the closet. Not burned, not shredded, just filed away. Because revenge isn't supposed to be your forever house. It's a blueprint, temporary scaffolding. You tear it down when the structure stands on its own again. I poured myself a drink that night. Not a toast, not a celebration, just a quiet glass of bourbon. I stepped onto the porch. The oak tree stood firm in the darkness. "Older than all of it. You didn't too lose me," I said softly to the night. "You gave me away." The wind shifted through the leaves, carrying the sound away like a secret that no longer needed to be kept. When I went inside, the house didn't echo. It breathed. And so did I. April 2023. Spring in Charleston arrives slowly, like a careful apology. The air warms before the trees fully bloom, and everything smells faintly of salt and soil. It's the kind of weather that makes people want to start again. For me, it wasn't about starting over. It was about staying steady. The noise that had once filled every inch of my head, her voice, his shadow, the courtroom, the press, was gone. What remained was silence. And silence isn't empty. It's earned. On April 3rd at exactly 7:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. Vanessa Hart. Message. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Just one sentence glowed against the dim screen. I made a mistake. No apology. No explanation. Just the echo of a woman realizing the gold she chased was painted tin. I didn't reply. I didn't rage. I didn't even sigh. I simply placed the phone face down on the kitchen table next to my mug of black coffee. The oak tree outside caught the morning light through its leaves. Green now, alive again. And that was my answer. April 6th, Olivia came by the house with a leather portfolio under her arm. She wore her spring trench, hair pulled back, no courtroom sharpness this time, just ease. She opened the portfolio on my table like someone laying down the last tile in a long, intricate floor. Final sale contract, she said. $1.2 million, signed by the buyers this morning. She passed me the pen. I signed slowly, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the ink on the page. Every loop of my signature was another line drawn between who I was then and who I am now. She closed the folder gently. No jagged edges left, she said. You built something clean. I nodded. And quiet. April 9th. A letter arrived from the title company. White envelope. Heavy paper. No drama. Just the official transfer confirmation. It felt nothing like the night she left. No slammed doors, no racing Tesla down the driveway. Just a smooth piece of paper sliding into my hands. Proof of a different kind of ending. I placed it in the same safe where the framed $100 bill had once lived unadorned. This time I didn't need to hide anything. It wasn't a weapon anymore, it was history. On April 13th I drove downtown for the last time related to any of this. The tower was still there. Glass, silent, no banners, no rooftop parties. It didn't belong to me anymore, but it didn't belong to him either. A new company name had been printed on a temporary banner, hung across the construction gate. I didn't stop to read it carefully. It didn't matter. That chapter had already been filed and shelved. I walked across the street to the same cafe Vanessa once loved, ordered a black coffee, sat at the back corner table. Two contractors at the next table were talking about the upcoming remodel. Not my problem, not my fight. It felt good to be irrelevant. April 17th, Eleanor came by. She wore a sundress and brought fresh bread from the market. She leaned against my counter like she used to years ago, before lawyers and lies filled every conversation. Are you ever going to answer her? She asked softly. No, I said. She tilted her head. Not even to say Youssef moved on. I smiled faintly. Silence is moving on. She studied me for a long time, then nodded. You always were better at endings than I was. I poured her a cup of coffee. No, I said. I just finally learned to stop writing sequels. We laughed. Not forced, not heavy. Just laughter. April 20th. I visited the oak tree at the edge of the yard. The ground beneath it was damp from a morning drizzle. I pressed my palm against its rough bark. When Vanessa left, I'd leaned against this tree like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Now it was still here, and so was I. The difference was I wasn't set holding on anymore. That night I sat on the porch with the lights off, listening to the soft chorus of crickets. A breeze drifted through the leaves overhead. Somewhere far off, a train's horn cut through the air. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. Can we talk? I didn't even unlock it this time. I set it down, leaned back in the chair, and let the night settle around me. No calls, no closure talks, no recycled heartbreak. The quiet was my boundary, and she couldn't cross it. April 24th, Olivia texted me one last time. Funds cleared, full amount deposited. I opened the banking app and saw the number there in black and white. $1,200,000. No confetti, no fireworks, just math. That's the thing they never tell you about real revenge. It doesn't feel like victory, it feels like stillness. Like walking into an empty house that no longer smells like the person who left. April 29th. I hosted a small dinner for Eleanor, Sam, and Olivia. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken, corn, and peach cobbler. These were the people who had stood quietly at my side while the world tried to shake itself apart. The people who never wanted to be in the spotlight, but never let me fall into the dark either. We clinked glasses. No speeches. No toasts. Just the sound of forks against plates and the breeze moving through open windows. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't think about her once during dinner. People always imagine revenge is a storm. They think it ends with shouting and broken glass. But the truth? The sweetest revenge is silence. It's when the person who tried to burn your world down realizes you rebuilt it without them, and you don't even need to look back. The oak tree swayed in the night wind outside, and for the first time I truly understood I had not just won, I had outlasted. May 2023. It was a Saturday morning, one of those rare spring mornings when Charleston feels like a painting. Blue sky brushed thin with white clouds. The air warm but not heavy. I'd gotten used to waking up without noise. No urgent calls, no attorneys, no press, just me, the coffee maker, and the slow stretch of daylight across the oak floorboards. The storm that began 2 years ago had burned itself out. But some echoes don't stand to roar, they whisper. The newspaper landed on my porch at 6:14 a.m. I still liked reading it the old way, ink on my fingertips. I carried it to the porch swing with a mug in hand, the smell of roasted beans mingling with the soft salt air. Halfway down the front page, tucked under a story about a ribbon cutting at the harbor, was a headline that made me pause. Graham Lasker engaged again. I let out a low breath, almost a laugh. Not a sharp one, not bitter, just soft, like air escaping a room that had been locked too long. I read the first paragraph. A charity gala in Atlanta. A younger woman, a ring the size of a quail egg. A carefully posed photo under a chandelier. The paper crinkled between my fingers, but not from anger, just amusement. The man she left me for, the man who sat across from me begging in that glass-walled boardroom, was putting on a tux and doing it all over again. History doesn't set repeat itself. It rhymes. I folded the paper neatly. Not a tear, not a crumple, just one clean crease down the middle. Then I stood, crossed the porch, and walked to the oak tree at the edge of the yard. Its leaves were full now, bright and new, catching the sunlight like stained glass. I'd leaned against this trunk through grief, calculation, justice, and finally quiet. And it had never moved, not once. I pressed my hand against the bark. It was warm, solid, indifferent. Graham could keep spinning his stories. Vanessa could keep searching for reflections in someone else. Sepst's glass tower, and me. I had something they Sepst never understand. Stillness. Later that afternoon, Eleanor dropped by with a peach pie. She wore her sunglasses and her hair up, smiling in that way that said she already knew I'd seen the headline. "You saw it?" she said, setting the pie down. "Yep." "You mad?" I shook my head. "No. Seth already lived that headline." She laughed. "You always were better at endings." I poured us each a glass of iced tea. Endings are easy when you don't chase sequels. She leaned on the counter, watching me closely. "You really did it, didn't you?" I raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Outlasted." I didn't answer with words. I didn't have to. That night I walked down to the water. The tide was low. The wooden docks groaned softly against the current. A shrimp boat moved slow against the horizon. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, letting the wind thread through my hair, the way it always did when I used to wait for Vanessa to come home. But now there was no waiting. No watching, no empty porch light burning against the dark. The night didn't belong to someone else anymore. It was mine. People always ask what revenge feels like at the end. They expect fireworks, applause, some grand explosion. But the truth, real revenge feels like standing at a quiet dock with the wind on your face and no weight on your chest. It's when their headlines don't touch you anymore. It's when the phone can light up and you don't care. It's when the house doesn't echo when you walk through it. I went back inside and poured myself a small bourbon. I set the glass next to the framed $100 bill on my desk. The ink had faded a little around the edges, not from damage, just from time. That bill wasn't a trophy. It wasn't even revenge. It was a blueprint. A reminder that sometimes the smallest move ends the biggest storm. The pen I used to sign away Graham's empire sat beside it in a velvet box. Not because I was sentimental, but because I liked keeping proof that precision beats noise. Always, as the night settled, the house grew quiet again. Outside, the oak tree rustled softly, the same way it had on the night she left. But I was different now. She'd walked away chasing a man who promised her the world. I stayed and built my own. One receipt at a time. I took the newspaper, folded it once more, and slid it into the bin. Not out of anger, out of finality. Because some stories don't need commentary. They just need closure. The crickets started up their midnight chorus. A car passed down the street. The world moved on. So did I. Some people chase power, I whispered into the stillness. I learned how to buy it wholesale. The wind caught my words, tangled them in the branches of the oak, and carried them off into the night. The revenge was done. The story was over. And for the first time in 2 years, it was just me. Alive, quiet, unshakable.